Hi everyone, welcome to this session on the PIR Methods Menu from Complexity to Clarity, selecting the best evaluation methods for policy and institutional reform. My name is Devika Lakode and my colleague here is Geetika Pandya. We are both from the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation, and today we're going to talk to you about expanding our menu of methods that we use for evaluation and how do we make that easier for all evaluators. So the agenda is a quick overview of the PIR methods menu that we have developed, and then understanding a little bit more about policy and institutional reform, which we're going to refer to as PIR for short. Then diving into a couple of case studies, evaluating policy and institutional reform in different settings, and then a little bit of a next description of our next steps and what's in store in the future for this menu. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge that this project was made possible by the generous support and partnership from the Millennium Challenge Corporation. We'd also like to acknowledge the intellectual contributions and leadership of Julian Groocroft and Douglas Glandon. Our sincere thanks to the whole team that worked on the PIR Methods menu at 3IE. So just to give you a quick overview of what is the PIR Methods menu. It is a web-based resource to select the best fit methods for the design, implementation, and evaluation of complex interventions. By complex, I mean, and we'll get into this, really difficult, layered, nuanced interventions that attempt to reform policies and institutions in low and middle income countries. It is a tool for young evaluators, an educational tool to learn about new methods, but it's also a guidance tool for expert evaluators who want to use methods outside their comfort zone. Anybody, including young or old evaluators who've been in the game for a long time, can come to this menu and ask a question, explore over 30 methods with their description, strengths, limitations, examples, guidance on how to use them. And they're able to sort of discover new methods that maybe otherwise they would not use or not think of, or maybe be able to compare and contrast different methods that they wouldn't have thought of before. And it's a living and constantly evolving resource, and we want your contributions and suggestions on what methods are missing, what can we add to the menu to make it even more richer and useful for everybody. So this is our QR code for the menu. If you want right now, you can take a second to scan it and see what the website looks like. We also have a little screenshot of the website here. This is our prototype website. We have also have the URL associated with it if the QR code doesn't work for some reason. We will be getting into the website itself and navigating through it in a bit, but just to show you, there are 3 different ways of entering this menu depending on your use case or your need. So depending on, maybe you are interested in finding the right approach based on a program phase. So it could be a design stage, implementation stage, evaluation stage, or you already know that you have some approaches in mind and you want to look up some more details about them. You can go through the approaches method. Or if you are just looking for more papers or resources on a specific method, we also have a resources page where we store all of this information.
All right, so we're going to spend a few minutes understanding what we mean by PIR. So PIR is the adoption or implementation of changes to the rules that govern interactions within or across organizations. These may be changes that are made to laws, policies, regulations, or changes to behavioral norms. And PIR interventions can present themselves in several forms. So let's look at one type. The first type is when you're establishing or improving laws or regulatory frameworks. We worked with members of country A who were interested in measuring whether the establishing of new laws helped improve private sector production in the agricultural sector. A second type of PIR intervention can look like capacity building or technical assistance. So country B, for example, was interested in capacitating their evaluators in their national evaluation and monitoring department through teaching them through trainings on evaluation methods and how to evaluate PIR interventions. A third type of PIR intervention could be developing information management systems. So, for example, country C was interested in digitizing their customs procedures to streamline import, export, and regulatory requirements surrounding those. So, why is it that PIR needs its own set of evaluation methods, or why is the evaluation of PIR interventions complex or difficult, as Devika described earlier? From a scoping review conducted by Huang and colleagues in the early stages of development of the PIR methods menu at 3IE, they found that evaluators typically struggle with using traditional methods for PIR problems. This is because sometimes there may be no identifiable counterfactual, or the unit of observation may be impossible to power statistically in a PIR intervention. Oftentimes, the desired outcomes, such as increased accountability, transparency, good governance, role delineation, these are all qualitative or descriptive, which makes measurement difficult. The theories of change may be challenging to map due to deviations in stated or unstated rules that govern behavior. For example, there may be contextual factors, competing interests, or policy cycles that are having an impact. Causal pathways in PIR interventions are often multi-level, non-linear, distal, or unpredictable. And finally, the change in PIR interventions is often dependent on external factors outside of the control of the interventions or the implementers. So we are now going to take a look at a couple of case studies to see how the methods menu can provide support and guidance in overcoming these challenges and effectively evaluating PIR. So let's look at this evaluation conducted by Oxfam in Afghanistan. The intervention here was on evaluating citizen voices in Afghanistan. So the National Solidarity Program was launched in 2003. Its main objective was to build, strengthen, and maintain community development councils as a medium for effective local governance and socioeconomic development. The members of the community development councils were elected and trained, and each council received small grants to govern themselves and also received support from NGOs who were facilitating partners. So in this case, the evaluators had a couple of main tasks. Their first task was to reconstruct the theory of change for the intervention, including the outcomes that it was seeking to achieve. The second main task was to examine the extent to which the intervention's key targeted outcomes had been materialized, investigate how the observed outcome change came about, and evaluate the impact of the intervention and its significance of its contributing factors. So in short, if we were to summarize this question, the main evaluation question, it would be, what is the mechanism through which the National Solidarity Program in Afghanistan impacted outcomes for the citizens? So let me pause briefly here because we would love to hear from you. If you have been involved in a similar kind of intervention or had a similar evaluation question posed at you, please put in the chat or anything that you might have experienced or how you tackled such a question. We'd love to take some input from you before we proceed. It doesn't have to be the same evaluation question, but if it's comparable in any way, or if you have any similar relevant experiences, it'd be really great to hear about those. Okay, let's proceed. It's possible that some of you have worked on something like this before, and you might have prior experience, but it's also possible that some of you are being posed with this kind of an evaluation question for the first time, and this might be your first PIR assignment. So how would you go about selecting the best fit approach for this problem? So what we're going to do here is we're going to rely on the PIR methods menu, and I'm going to switch over to the menu in a second. But we want to basically explore the menu to answer the question about which mechanism did the impact of the intervention come about by. Give me just a second here as I talk to my screen. So as Devika had described, this is the PIR methods menu prototype. And she did explain how we can navigate. There are 3 ways to navigate through this menu. If we go via program phases, for example, we know that the National Solidarity Program is at its completion, and the evaluators are seeking to do an ex post evaluation at this point. Let's go into ex post evaluation. Here we're posed with a couple of questions that may match the evaluation question at hand. I'm going to glance briefly over this just in the interest of time and try to see if there are any keywords or any messages that match the main question that we have at hand. So just from a quick scan, I see that this question, which is what was the causal mechanism linking the program's activities and outputs to its outcomes, matches quite nicely with the question that we have at hand. Let's look at some of the approaches that come up when we click on this question. Okay, so there are 5 possible options of methods that could be used to evaluate the National Solidarity Program in Afghanistan. So we have contribution analysis, which is a confirmatory evaluation approach that assesses the policy or reform's contribution to outcomes or observed changes. Okay, this could be a possible contender for our problem. There is outcome harvesting and outcome mapping. I know that both of these methods are participatory methods, and just in the interest of time, I'm going to use my discretion to eliminate these because we may not have the means or the information available to conduct participatory research at this stage. We have process tracing as an example, which is to test and refine a theory by observing how a policy or reform worked in a single case. And we also have realist evaluations, which is a theory-driven approach to evaluation based on critical realism that analyzes programs based on configurations of context, causal mechanisms, and outcomes. This could be a fit, realist evaluations. However, we're lacking a lot of the information of the context. So just for the benefit of this exercise, our top 2 contenders emerge as contribution analysis and process tracing. Let's go into each of these methods to see whether they're a fit. Okay, so when you go into any approach on the PIR methods menu, you're presented with a short description about the method, strengths of the method, limitations, and then guidance materials that you can dive deeper into, and also empirical applications or examples of how that method was used for a PIR problem. Just from a quick scan, I can see that contribution analysis is useful when an intervention's theory of change is fixed and there's little scope for variation. However, we know that one of the main tasks of the evaluators of the Citizen Voices in Afghanistan project is to reconstruct the theory of change. So there is going to be variation there. So this in itself is a criteria that we can maybe eliminate contribution analysis for this evaluation. So let's go into our second contender, which is process tracing. When we get here, we're presented with similar information. And just from a quick scan, we see that process tracing can be applied to many different types of outcomes with sufficient evidence to confirm that if the change has occurred. It is transparent and replicable. and it is applicable for PIR interventions in which pathways to change are uncertain and settings may be complex, which is exactly right for the Citizen Voices in Afghanistan project that we're tasked with evaluating. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back into our presentation to see how the evaluators made their methodological choices. Okay, so we see here that the evaluators ended up choosing a couple of elements of process tracing, and they also used a counterfactual analysis. Uh, as we had previously mentioned, PIR interventions require an unconventional approach, and often one single evaluation method may not be sufficient to examine everything that's going on in a PIR intervention. This is certainly evident from this example that we're seeing. We also want to caveat by saying that depending on the context, the information available, the knowledge and the skill level of the evaluators, and the resources that are available, the methodological choices can vary significantly. But the methods menu here helps in finding the best fit options, at least for the particular problem at hand.
Now let's look at another case study just to drive home this point. And this is a similar kind of intervention that took place in Ghana. Completely different setting, but a similar kind of problem that the evaluators came up against. So, for context, this is the Ghana Strengthening Accountability Mechanisms Project, which was a 5-year USAID project that sought to strengthen citizens' oversight of capital development projects to improve local government transparency, accountability, and performance. As you can already see here, these are complicated outcomes to measure government transparency, accountability, performance, and the intervention itself, which is strengthening of citizens' oversight, is also encompasses multiple different activities. So in this project, in 50 districts, the GSAM introduced public audits with the Ghana Audit Service, and in a further 50 districts, they introduced social audits. So for the social audit, they supported local level CSOs to regularly monitor and gather information on the planning and construction of selected capital development projects led by district assemblies. This included strengthening of the CSO and citizen capacities for using social accountability tools, monitoring of capital projects, and dissemination of this information to the public. So you can see in this last line all the different activities that were taking place. And the main question in front of the evaluators of this project was to investigate a contribution claim, which is that citizen oversight over capital projects as a result of the GSAM project has improved accountability of local government authorities in the delivery of their capital projects. So they had a very clear sort of claim, and they want to investigate whether this is true. They want to evaluate whether this intervention specifically affected these outcomes. So we could think about what type of method would we choose to investigate a contribution claim like this one. And if anyone has thoughts on this, feel free to drop a line in the chat if you have any ideas on how you would go about this, or if you have in the past explored something like this or worked on projects similar to this. But I can also stop sharing this and show you on the methods menu how we would go about an exercise like this. So if I'm going to share my web page. So from the home page, as Geetika showed before, we could enter through program phases, but we could also enter through evidence approaches, and that we actually have a search feature. So I'm going to show you how to use the search feature. So when we use a search feature, we can search for something like contribution, because that is kind of what we're looking for. And based on the descriptions and in the methods, we come up with 4 different options. And as you can see, contribution analysis shows up, which also showed up in Geetika's example. And then we have some other different kinds of methods that show up. For example, nested and actor-based theories of change, which unpacks the impact pathways of complex interventions by taking into account nested actor groups and alternative nested pathways. Performance evaluations, which may incorporate a variety of methods to evaluate the performance of a program, typically without examining the impact of the program on outcomes, and then exploratory approach to test and interventions theory of change. And as you can see from these different methods, this particular one, contribution analysis, fits the contribution claim investigation that our evaluators want to do, which is a confirmatory evaluation approach that assesses a policy or reform's contribution to outcomes or observed changes. And it ties back nicely to the Afghanistan case study, because in that situation, we were testing the theory of change and we wanted to see what the theory of change actually is based on what happened in the project. Whereas in this one, they're very clear that this is what we did. We had our citizen oversight intervention, and these are the outcomes that we're interested in evaluating the impact on. And so we have a fixed theory of change. There's not a lot of scope for variation. And we have sort of a precise project that we want to evaluate, and so based on that, we can choose this method and go ahead with it. We could look at guidance material on how it's done, the 6-step approach. We can look at what are the different steps and implement that in our evaluation. So let me go back to the slide so we can see what did the evaluators actually use in this case. So it turns out that the mechanism had a total of 12 components across 3 causal chains. There was CSO oversight through report cards, district assembly engagement, citizen voice through scorecards, and they selected contribution tracing, which is sort of a combination of contribution analysis and process tracing as a method to evaluate this intervention. Which is, again, goes back to saying that these are difficult interventions to evaluate. Sometimes we compare and combine different methods. And one of our hopes is that eventually our menu in the future iteration will help you combine different methods and compare or contrast different methods to be able to come up with a hybrid method if that's the requirement of your evaluation. So looking ahead, what's in store for the methods menu? As we all know, AI has encompassed all of us at this point. So we are also trying to power our methods menu with AI tools. Some of the features that we hope for it to have is conversational guidance on method selection. So right now you saw it's kind of like a click and filter kind of an interface. So we want to add some more like a chatbot kind of interface to it. It can help you compare and contrast some shortlisted methods, provide additional details on a method of your choice, explain methods that are difficult to understand, and with more instruction and some more background on combination of different methods, we can also have it help you decide how to combine methods in the future. With all of this, with the caveat to say that AI is evolving rapidly, significantly enhancing the technology of knowledge retrieval and summarization, and we aim to stay at the forefront of this technology, but we want to be cautiously optimistic that it has its limitations. And at the end of the day, what we put in the back end is what it has to be well curated and well thought out, and that is what we focus our energy on, is to make sure that the content of this is of the highest quality for evaluators to use, and then the technology is something we're just using to make that easier and more democratic to access. This is a screenshot of our draft chatbot that we've been working on, where you can ask it about a method and it sort of gives you a little bit of an overview and you can chat with it about it. And we would love to hear from you.
So 3IE is extremely excited about continuing to develop the methods menu as an educational resource for the global evaluation community. We see the current evidence landscape as a critical and opportune time to prioritize the maintenance and dissemination of these knowledge resources about the best fit methods for PIR interventions. We also want to leverage the technology, the latest cutting edge technology that Devika mentioned in democratizing access to methodological resources. And overall, our vision for the methods menu is to bring it to as many evaluators as possible. And your involvement will be critical and instrumental in making that happen. So at 3IE, we are looking for partnerships and resources to take the methods menu to the next stage. If you're interested in partnering with us, please contact us on the emails listed on this page. You can send us your questions, comments, or any opportunities. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much. And we can now open up the chat or the Q&A feature for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. While we wait for questions or other chats, I wanted to say someone asked us about where we got these case studies from. Actually, 3IE had done created an evidence gap map of reforms, institutional reform interventions from across the literature, and the two case studies that we retrieved were from that gap map, and we're happy to share that with you as well shortly, and you'll be able to explore what other kinds of interventions exist in this space and where are the gaps in the evidence as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, on the PIR methods menu, there are empirical applications as well, which are essentially case studies on how PIR interventions have been evaluated. So if you're interested in digging deeper, the methods menu also has resources that would be relevant.
Cool. Looks like everyone's feeling shy today, but if you wanna contact us with questions, I have put our info in the chat.
Yeah, if it's helpful at this point, maybe we can navigate over to the PIR methods menu, Devika, and show a few other features of the menu as we wait for questions, maybe for people who are interested.
So as we showed you, we could navigate from program phases, and here's a long list of the evidence approaches, and those can further also be filtered by program phases: program development, implementation, and evaluation. So for example, if we filter to implementation, because sometimes there's evaluation and implementation are combined and you want to use different methods for different stages of the project. There are certain methods that you can start using as the project is being implemented, which is sometimes really important for policy and institutional reform, because they're 5, 7, 10-year long projects where you don't want to wait all the way to the end to evaluate it, and you want everything in the middle also to have some kind of methodological rigor of being implemented, documented, and the data being collected over time, so that at the end when you're evaluating, you have systematically measured things so you can actually say what the impact of the program was. And then we also have another feature here, which is modes of inquiry, where depending on, like Geetika was saying, what are the capacities that your evaluation team has, what are the different skills that your team has, you can choose from these different modes of inquiry what are the resources that are available to you. So for example, if you have the resources to go into the community and do a participatory approach where you are able to interview multiple people, get them involved in your evaluation, then some of these methods can be really beneficial, because they can help you guide your evaluation, and help you sort of interact with the participants and do a more deep dive, intensive sort of an evaluation. And then we can also show you our resources page so that you get a sense of what kinds of resources are available here. We have a lot of other of our partners or people we have talked to and have similar ideas about, bringing different kinds of methods to evaluators across the development community, and we have them listed here. So you can also access their resources and, combine information from multiple areas. Of course, better evaluation is being one of them. And then we also have a paper repository. So in case, you're not satisfied just with small descriptions, you want to get into the academic jargon and like understand in more detail, more technical detail, what is going on with every method. Again, you can filter by all these different sectors, say health, maybe there's some health system reform that you're looking at and you want to look at case studies that are similar to the one that you're trying to evaluate. You can look at all of these different options, which they're also further filtered by approaches. So you can say, okay, maybe I want to look specifically for health intervention that use process tracing. Then you can filter by process tracing and find, okay, if somebody did a evaluation of a free universal healthcare in Ghana using process tracing, maybe you can use that. And then there's two different kinds of papers that we have. One is empirical applications, so basically case studies which you can use then to understand how someone did it, or there's guidance material, which are more theoretical papers that help sort of explain what the method is and how to implement it in a slightly more theoretical or more sometimes more practical way. We're saying do step 1, do step 2, do step 3, do step 4, which is really helpful, especially if you're not familiar with the method. And anything else you want to say, Gitika?
No, I think that was a useful demo of the website. It would be great if people can explore this on their own, send us any feedback that they might have for other methods that they would like to see on the menu that they've applied before for PIR context. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. So the first one is, I would like to ask you about efficiency analysis and if these kind of methods are suggested to improve productivity. Devika, do you want to answer that one?
So, for example, we have what we saw one method when we were looking through contribution called performance evaluation. So that is one option where you could explore something like that to see, okay, how was the actual performance of this project and so on. I think you're welcome to explore more and see maybe you have something more specific in mind. You can read through and look at what are the different methods, and I think that's the goal of this menu, is that you're able to go in with your unique need and search for methods. And I'm sure that maybe there's not an exact fit, but there will be something that can help you think of more different ideas. And then there's another question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kitika.
So this question asks how useful PIR approaches are in generating evidence for policy priorities that are sensitive to political economy and time constraints. So we have in fact worked on a real world problem applying PIR to a political economy analysis or context. So while it might not be directly applicable to a ready-made evaluation method on the menu, like we were suggesting earlier, PIR problems often require a combination of methods or certain elements of certain methods put together to address all elements of the PIR intervention. So for political economy context, it might be useful to look at something like stakeholder analysis or systems mapping to understand all of the stakeholders in play, the political sort of forces that are in play in those contexts, and apply the lessons from some of these methods to the context that is at hand for you. Yeah, so exploring the methods menu to look at which elements of which methods would apply, I think would be the best step forward. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other contexts in which you think or you would like to see PIR applied? I think people have the QR code, but I'm just gonna put the URL for the methods menu in the chat so people can explore the methods menu on their own. And yeah, if there are any questions, feedback, or any comments about the menu or about future partnerships or opportunities for us to collaborate with you on, please feel free to write to either of us. We would be very excited to explore that.
Thank you everyone for joining. It was really great to meet you all and interact with you, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much.